By the time I reached City Morris, I could barely carry the saddlebag. I could feel it tugging at my jerkin the whole way. Trotting slow enough to avoid attention had been one of the longest walks of my life, and I had to keep stopping to pull my jerkin tighter around me. Fears played in my head. If I was this sick, what if I never even woke up tomorrow to enjoy the journal that I had reclaimed? Was it too late to heal it? Could Radaway get rid of the magical radiation that infected my body so much for so long? Dumping the saddlebag down before the sly merchant, I knelt down to merely catch my breath, before tipping the saddlebag out behind his counter, hidden from Artery. The medical unicorn was arguing with the guards, but I could only presume Sooty had paid them off.
"So, little laddie," he began, "seems you held up your end of the bargain. Now, I may be a ruthless and sly old devil, but I always honour a deal. You don't stay a merchant long if you don't."
I looked up at him pleadingly, while using a hoof to push my jerkin back into position carefully. Dumping that saddlebag had almost made it right up. "Please, I need this medicine now." My voice was barely a whisper, as my throat fought to move without pain. I can feel it getting worse."
"Well, of course it would. Exertion won't help your sickness," he sneered, counting the materials. "And I can only presume that you have exerted yourself a fair amount while worrying a lot. Now," he nodded in approval at my efforts, before tapping a hoof on the counter, "what say you and I discuss your employment, lad?" That grin could have launched a dozen balefire missiles with the sheer hate it brought up. Here he was, looking at a dying pony, and all he could think of was how he could exploit him further for his own ends. I had met horrible ponies, and seen the work of tyrants like Master Red-Eye, but this was a whole new and personal level of evil.
If I agree, can I have some medicine now? Please, I don't think I'll live past tonight." It was begging, but I had nothing else to bargain with. A ruined hoof machine thingamajig wouldn't be worth anything, right?
"Oh, now, Murky lad, don't go getting eager now. We've yet to find out what you can do for me before I give you something. Far as I see it, you've got to earn your medicine, not just take it and then not come back. See?"
He had me trapped. I agreed. He explained his job. It was quite simple, really, but deceptively important. I would have to carry bribes to various individuals, both slaver and laborer, scrap workers to pocket goods, guards to look the other way for said goods, and, of course, deliver merchandise. He would pay 1 medicine per job, just enough to keep me alive from day to day. That was my only payment to work as his little courier. My life was entirely in City Morris's hooves now. A slave to a slave.
"Now, in accordance with our deal, I'll present you with the things you did earn for putting the competition out of business, lad."
He had continued talking even as I sat in the back of his shop, listening to the guards restoring order. The trio would be along any moment, I could guess. I hadn't cared. I simply sat on my rump, a good little slave awaiting Morris's command, or my time to return to the fun farm for a shift. I wondered if Morris could get me to stay here with him, rather than at the fun farm with the gang. Wait, the things I earned! Even as I looked up from my hooves, he let both my journal and the arcane component drop from his mouth in front of me. I didn't hold back, taking the journal in both front hooves and hugging it tightly. I felt my eyes water. Sooty left me alone to return to his merchant front, no doubt preparing to argue with Artery when the unicorn noticed Sooty's sudden increase in merchandise. He said I was to be sent out at night to take a bribe to a guard near the gate who might be able to hook him up with a small supply of apple sugar bombs from the slaver kitchens. Until then, I was just to stay quiet and hidden in the back of his shop unit, to remain nestled next to an old broken cooking unit. Home cooking in an airport shop? Old Equestria must have been a lovely place, and be as invisible as I could be to his operations until called. Right now, at least, I didn't mind that. I had something to look at. I set the arcane circuit board to the side. I tuned out the slaves crying out in pain, as Artery helped them with his magic. He hadn't ever learned anesthetic spells. I laid the journal open before me, and slowly, oh, so slowly, opened it to the page I knew. Hi, Mom. Reaching over for just a second, I crossed off the checklist image of my journal. I didn't have a real home, but looking now at her before me, drawn by my imagination and memory, I felt like I had come home to something. Even as tears dropped on the page, I managed to smile a little as I saw her comforting gaze. I paused. She was just a drawing, but seeing this, I remembered. I remembered the feeling to have shaken off my master, to ignore Red Eye's demands, and tried to stay inside and draw this when they were demanding me to leave. I had taken my own path, looking from the beautifully comforting face of my mother to the back of Sooty Morris. I knew there was no way he was going to keep me under his hoof like this. I was getting out of here. I was going to live. Thanks, Mom. Glad you're back. My plan was not entirely advanced. There was little I could really do here, but simply attempt to steal the medical supplies from behind Morris's back, and then hoof it for the exit before finding a way to blend in outside. Morris wouldn't come chasing me all the way to the fun farm across Philadelphia. Even he didn't have that influence. Nope, it wasn't too fancy a plan, but it was surrounded in dangers. From Morris and his bodyguard to the guards at the exit. If ponies tried to grab me, they could stop me. Or worse, they might even tear off my jerkin. The device and everything else would be lost, among other things too. I pulled it as tight as the frayed cord around my torso would go, feeling the radio, parchment, journal, and circuit board stuffed inside. I was going to use the saddlebag I'd brought in to leave with the surplus items Morris had left behind his counter, but even so, the amount stuffed in my jerkin felt unsteady and cumbersome. I was not going to risk it being anywhere else, however. They were all too important. Even as I readied up quietly, I felt another wave of nausea wash across me. Coughing loudly, I stuffed my mouth with a hoof as I attempted to stop myself from drawing too much attention. Stomach retching from the harsh coughing, vision hazy from the pain and exhaustion, I lay back for a good time, simply trying to get my strength back. I couldn't do this. Not physically. My limbs were too weak, and my injured one only getting worse. I couldn't run on a hoof that was mildly disjointed. If only I could dull the pain. My eyes fell to the syringes around the bag, left by Morris. I didn't know which one was... what were they called? Medics? There were a few styles. One with 2 little pipes to send extra drugs in with it, one thin and simple, one constructed out of a bottle with a grayish liquid in it. In my condition, to take the wrong one would probably kill me through system overload. The one with 2 feeds looked tempting. It was fancy. Pain removal was fancy, wasn't it? The simple one would just be some chem drug, right? I rolled the third one, the bottle, over. It had a picture of a broken hoof, then a cured one. Aha! That's just what I needed, right? I glanced around before gently putting the bottle up against my injured hoof, the needle pointing at it. Wait a minute. I remembered last night, listening to DJ Ponthry. He had been warning about a drug made from the gray blood of a Hydra beast. I glanced down at the bottle, before almost kicking it away in shock and disgust. My face clenched as the thought of what I had almost done slammed home. No chances. I took the simple one. The simpler the better. Simpler couldn't kill as easy, right? Maybe it was the right one. With a little whine, I plunged the needle in and hoofed the plunger. Okay, not very much change going on. I didn't feel any.
Whoa, boy, there we go.
My vision swam as I wobbled and then fell to the side. My everything utterly numb. A bliss of relief as my hoof stopped aching and my lungs dulled off entirely. Sleep felt tempting as the waves of pain receding from my body. Slowly, I began to feel return of control to my limbs after a minute or so. But in my mind, I felt so different. I felt nice, like all the pain of the world had just disappeared. If only I had more of this stuff to take. As I awaited my limbs to regain enough feeling, and, to be frank, my mind to stop thinking, pretty lights, I began to think about my plan a little. Perhaps I was thinking about all of this wrong, trying to take a ton of medical supplies with me. If I was going to be waiting to regain my ability to move, perhaps I could sneak a rat away and a healing potion to get ahead of the game, in case anything went wrong. Couldn't hurt. Not that I'd feel it right now anyway. Ha! I realized that I had a smile plastered on my face when I saw my reflection in a metal oven door opposite me. Wow. It even made me smile? Med-X! Best drug ever! Whistlist enjoying the high of a painkiller, I lay back, hiding around the back of the oven from Morris, sipping a rat away while glancing at my mother's picture. It made me smile for real, even through the haze of medically induced relief from life. That was a feeling I'd always... Oh! I almost sprayed the rat away right over my journal as I sickeningly swallowed the horrid liquid. It tasted like orange paint! The cover featured a little foal enjoying it with a straw, smiling like a little puppy. I seriously questioned the taste and sanity of any pony who enjoyed this stuff. It'd take clinical craziness to see this as anything but just disgusting. Sighing, I kept drinking. All things considered, I had no right to complain. I watched Morris from behind. Clearly, he believed me to be a broken-in worker, given that he was paying me little heed. I'd show him. I'd show them all. Soon as I could gallop again, I was going to get out. I didn't hesitate. For once, I didn't falter. I didn't hold back or restrict myself. I couldn't feel the pain anymore. I didn't feel as sick after a rat away and a healing potion. They'd taken the edge off things. I knew I'd need more to actually combat the sickness, but I had to go suddenly. Morris was coming back from the front to inspect, so I had gone for it. I barreled past him, ducking to one side and grabbing the saddlebag I had stuffed in my mouth as I darted out into the waiting area. Slaves looked up at the commotion as I saw the guards look ready to repel another riot. The entire place was already on high alert, even as ponies lay on the ground, injured still from earlier. I felt my jerkin bounce about a little from all the items stuffed in it, including one healing potion for quicker access.
Get back here, you little thief! Chiselhoof! Get him!
Morris bellowed behind me, sending his bodyguard to chase me down. Finally able to gallop properly, I put my head down and pushed harder, ducking under chair platforms to avoid the huge bodyguard with his longer strides. I felt his mouth try to grab my tail, even as I wriggled between two rows of seating, the ensuing tug pulling a few strands of hair out with a horrid snap. I felt the tug, but still under the Med-X induced relief. I felt no pain, other than the slight mourning for my already lackluster and patchy tail losing even more. Up ahead there were 2 rows of chairs on either side of the pillars that went all the way to the exit. I could see the 2 guards already galloping towards me from up ahead. Crap! I hadn't anticipated them openly helping Morris like this. Hurdling the chairs with a quick hop, skip, and jump apiece, I kept ahead of the bodyguard. There was only one hope to make it by them, as I witnessed a huge pile of mangled chairs thrown together in by the waiting area, near a barred window. Presumably, the megaspell shockwave had blasted them away from the large open area near it. 2 choices: jump the window, or hide in the chairs. As much as the medics dulled pain, I knew leaping from 2 stories up with a damaged hoof would be asking way too much of it. I dove into the pile of chairs, wriggling in amongst the twisted metal and sharp edges as only a small pony like me can. The bodyguard and 2 slavers arrived and just stared at it, before starting to hurl wrecks off the pile. I could hear the other slaves milling about in fear or confusion while Morris was arguing with Artery over what I had really stole. Somehow, I doubted I would have many friends after this around here. I crept through the wreckage of the chairs, invisible to the guards tugging on them frantically. I could hear them screaming for me to come out and be punished. As terrified as I was, I had to agree with the snarky part of my mind that they were not using the most persuasive argument to convince me. Fighting down the overwhelming urge to curl up and shiver, I kept creeping. I had to get out. I had to get my mom out, too, even if it were just my drawing. Sneaking through the chairs, I noticed an error on their part. They were all on one side of the pile, assuming I was just hiding. Quietly, I pulled myself from the opposite side, silently praying no watching slave would give me away. Cautiously, I trotted off. The guards were still pulling at the pile. They hadn't even looked up as I began to canter and then gallop again, looking behind me. I felt an elation as I saw them get smaller and smaller, not noticing me. What idiot wouldn't watch everything around them? I promptly felt myself run into something with a dull thud. Well, that answered that question. It hadn't hurt, but the impact had knocked me over, spraying the chems across the floor. In a panic, I reached out to reclaim them before seeing what I had hit. My mood dropped like a stone from the top of the terminal control tower. "Hi," sneered Noose as her 2 buck companions spread out around me. "Come to give us your prize, or just to report for the flank kicking you're going to get for trying to betray us?" My blood ran cold. No. This wasn't supposed to happen. I was so close to being out. It began. She didn't hesitate. She had taken a heavy blow to the head during the brawl, and blood still matted her mane. She wanted payment, and she wanted revenge. Her front hoof slammed into the side of my head hard enough to whip my small frame clean around and launch me a good 3 feet to the side. Even through the medics, I felt that hard, as pain lanced through my mouth and jawline. Whimpering and trying to get up, I saw her shadow. Noose raised up on 2 legs and slammed her front ones home upon my chest. I couldn't hold it in. I screamed at the top of my voice as I felt ribs buckle, and a spray of blood come from my mouth. High-pitched and raspy, I howled as she beat down on me, hoof after hoof. I went blind in one eye as it blackened and began to swell up. She picked me to my hooves and bucked me into the wall. The hard concrete reawoke my sickness as I felt the wind knocked out of me through a rough throat and lungs, only to wail as she kicked out my injured leg. "Don't! Please, Noose!" I pleaded, trying to stand back up, but it was to no avail. "Don't kill me! Don't!" I collapsed against the wall, sliding down. I had been beaten before, but this was different. She wasn't aiming to knock me around. This was true combat, with the intent to take out your opponent. I wasn't built for this. "Please, Noose, I'll do." With the sudden removal of gravity, I was hurled back toward the center of the entranceway. Landing on my front, I cried out as my ribs crunched on the floor directly. My legs didn't even bother to stop me. Without the medics, I'd probably have passed out. I tried to stand. If I could just reach another healing potion. Gulp it quick. Or another medic's. Anything. Just enough to give me a boost to run. If I could just get away. My efforts led me to stumble and collapse as every joint shivered and failed me. Gritting my teeth, I sought to crawl, whinnying as my eye pounded with the pain of quick swelling around it. The feeling of not seeing. Oh, goddesses, was it permanent? They weren't willing to allow me to move. Her hoof descended on my injured leg, putting pressure on it enough to make me howl in pain as she grinned wickedly. I could see Morris and the guards approaching. He had that look of justification on his face, as he looked on me, beaten and bloodied. I shivered constantly, my body retching from coughing, and feeling pain from my legs, ribs, and face. I could feel blood running from somewhere on my face. Oh, Celestia, it hurts so much. Please, just make it stop. The Bucks were approaching, clearly wanting some of the game too. Noose only glared at them as she looked down at me, her prize to beat on. As I stared upwards, my tears mixing with blood from stinging wounds flowing around the already swollen parts of my face. I saw the lack of mercy and cold sadism that drove her. My chest moved sporadically, my breathing irregular, as I struggled to regain breath.
"Hey, Noose! He didn't drop many chems. Where's the rest?"
Lemon seemed intent. Fuck if I know. Just wait. We'll get 'em later. The third buck wandered up to me, looking down. Maybe not, he grinned, his eyes looking at my jerkin. He's hiding something. There's lumps. No! I struggled, pulling my hoof with a retching pain from under hers, trying to flail to me feet. I've received only a half-buck for my troubles, sending me staggering even as I forced myself to my hooves. They would get my journal again, and...
"Come here, you're hiding my chems!"
They advanced. I felt them on every side, grabbing, pulling, and trying to get at the things I had hidden beneath my jerkin for so long.
"Give!"
"No!" I screamed, forcibly lashing out to little avail as my little hooves were batted aside. "Get him!" I felt teeth grab at my jerkin and pull. I tried to pull away, but the pressure only increased. A horrible ripping sound met my ears. As I fell forward, the pressure released. I hit the ground without my jerkin, feeling the concrete across my whole body. Adrenaline overcame the searing pain, enough to turn and hobble backwards. My journal, my radio, the parchment checklist, and the arcane circuit all fell to the floor beside the medical equipment and the torn remnants of my jerkin. But none of them were looking at them. Every pony in the entire terminal simply stood and stared at the battered little pony before them, who could barely stand up, who was crying with pain as blood from small cuts dripped to the floor. They didn't even look at his swollen and blinded eye or the bleeding lips. They all looked at one thing, and one thing only. "What is our—" Lemon broke the ice proper.
"What? He's a fucking Pegasus?"
I may not have been honest with you. No, I'm not an earth pony. I am, indeed, a Pegasus. I'm sorry. I owe you an explanation, I know. But believe me when I say, how could I just admit it? The wasteland hates Pegasi with a degree that I would likely have been killed long ago in Philadelphia. Hell, I've been lucky my past masters were content to have any slaves, regardless of what type of pony they were. I do not know how it happened. Perhaps genetically, my mother was related to a Pegasus lost in the wastes. Perhaps my father was one and my mother never told me. Maybe it's just blind chance of long-lost genes from 200 years ago. One way or another, it happened. I was born with these two stupid wings on my sides. More than my size and timidness, they have been the reason that every place I was sent to work as a slave immediately treated me like dirt. I would be blamed for mistakes that Pegasi made before the balefire bombs, or for the continued rumors of them all surviving up there happily and ignoring us all. I would receive less food, have my wings prodded or struck by other slaves. They used to call me flightless. Many of them used to make up stories that I had come down from the clouds because my real parents didn't want me anymore. But I swear, this is the honest truth. I am a born wastelander, a born slave. My mother told me while I was young a little saying. There's a story behind every pair of wings in the wasteland, little Murky. Pegasi were so rare that every one of them had a story to tell about the places they had flown to, such as what the world was like above the clouds, about how they had survived in a world that generally hated them, or the things they had done thanks to their unique abilities. Pegasi were incredible, unique. Every single one of them had some sort of tale behind them. But I am not truly a Pegasus. They can fly. I cannot. My story is nothing but one gradually worsening situation. When I was at the rock farm, I was still very young. I hadn't yet grown up enough to fly, but once I was developed enough, my wings began flapping. They had moved and twitched about however they wanted, and I kept imagining that if I could flap them hard enough, then my mother and I could have gone someplace safer. My master had spied them beginning to move, and he took steps to ensure his slaves did not leave. A blunt mallet in his mouth, he had ordered 2 other slaves to drag me to his storehouse, where an anvil had waited. He didn't want me to fly. Ever. He broke me. I had never recovered. Damaged while too young, unable to develop properly. I had never grown the required muscles while my wings were fragmented, and poorly healed to not have enough strength to withstand the forces required. I can't even move them from my side anymore to spread them. They just sit there and hurt. I've tried. Believe me, I've tried. But I cannot even get them to raise, never mind even think of flapping. Even then, I doubted I would ever understand the mechanics of flight. No, I will never fly. Not like the stable dweller. She didn't even need wings at all. She would see the sky I could never hope to witness. To see the sun rise and set. To see Luna's glorious moon, or to view the wastes from the safety above. I had no place up there. So now I have these 2 useless and painful, ill-developed things on my sides that had no place with me. They are hated by every pony, myself more than any. So you see why I had to hide it? Why I had to wear that jerkin and try to prevent any pony from knowing? No, I'm not a Pegasus. I am like the earth ponies, only without the things that they are known for. I have all the disadvantages of both types, with nothing to consider a helpful trait at all. As far as I am concerned, I'm not a Pegasus. I'm just a weak pony. If any pony in Philadelphia were to know, I could only look forward to a very short life. The slaves would seek to probably kill me immediately. I've tried to hide it every place I've been. Philadelphia longer than the others, but some pony always finds out somehow, and the hate and bigotry begins again. Now they know too. I didn't have long. Their confused stares and disbelieving murmurings as the crowd gathered would only distract Nuisance City for a short time. Even as I heard some voices begin to raise, hatred and bile spilled forth with shouts demanding that I be brought to take revenge on. I knew not every pony in Equestria hated us Pegasi, but the slaves, often prone to emotional simplicity and seeking to vent anger, would see me as a common foe. I reached down, grabbing a healing potion in my mouth, and simply letting the liquid fall down my throat without even swallowing. The act almost made me choke and vomit it right back out, but the refreshing feeling of my new wounds beginning to close gave me enough strength as I scrambled to pack my things into the fallen saddlebag. The entire crowd began to move as one. A surge of screaming faces, still hopped up on violence, wanting to express their anger on one of the race who had abandoned them. I could see Noose trying to force her way through. Sooty Morris's bodyguard was behind her. I had only seconds to get away. Lemon was still standing beside me. With a scowl, he attempted to grab me with his front hooves. Panicking as I heard the stomping of fanatical slaves gunning for my blood, I lashed out. My back right hoof flicked out just like before, connecting with a much softer area. I felt Lemon squeal and fall right off of me. Throwing the saddlebags over my torso, I immediately galloped for as much as I was worth. Ahead of me, whistles blew and warning shots blasted into the air as a line of guards galloped into the terminal building past the scrap wall. Pike and Kosh dove for cover as the large ponies thundered through. Stuck between the two, I opted to keep going, trusting my small size compared to the huge crowd behind me. Praying silently for safety, I dodged as best I could around them, even diving beneath the guard, shouting out in pain as his battle saddle opened fire right next to my ears. I scrambled out the back of their line, just as the slaves collided behind me into the guards. One guard looked at me for just a second, before being pulled back into the terminal by the rush of slaves. Assuming they were rioting, the guards paid me little heed, presumably as the saddlebags hid my wings. I stopped for just a second as I glanced back, seeing the rush being barely held by the guards from charging into the airfield after me. All of their eyes were on me, or rather, my torso. I heard shouts like, "Tear his wings off!" or "Revenge for the wastes!" 100 ponies crying for my death. I was alone these days when not able to sit and listen to the radio. Now, more than ever. I galloped off, trying not to cry so much I couldn't see where I was running as I hunted for some place to hide. Anywhere. I didn't have to travel far. With adrenaline dropping off quickly, I couldn't go too far. On instinct, I sought out a place no pony else would ever go normally. The Philadelphia Pegasus Airport's control tower. Old scaffolding had been torn around it from the blast, but to a pony with nothing to lose right now, it was an acceptable risk to climb. I sat on the top, the roof above the control center, watching the expanse of industry and red haze of Philadelphia around me in all directions. On the horizon, I could see the sunset, blurred and impossible to properly view, given it was behind the cloud layers above. Just a deeper smudge of orange, but something in me, maybe driven by my status as a Pegasus, just knew. That sunset escaped the darkness of the night each day. What lay beyond it? Could I ever follow it into the unknown? Funny. If I were a real Pegasus, I could have just flown away from here. I was higher than the wall, after all. That sunset would be a beacon to call me to freedom. But now, it played only on my deepest and most impossible wishes. I sat under a small tarpaulin that had once been used for observation to hide from the Griffin patrols. I doubted they'd be looking for me. Their jobs were more specific and never involved hunting on top of control towers or other high places. Indeed, most of them flew below the height I was sitting at. I was crying, of course. Why wouldn't I, of all ponies, be? My eye had slowly regained sight a little, but everything on that side of my face was still hazy from swelling. My journal sat open next to me. The parchment sketch of the stable dweller, number 6, and the unknown mare was beside it. The radio was playing DJ Ponthry, as he spoke of the efforts of heroes all around Equestria, but none of it seemed to make any difference anymore. Word would spread. A Pegasus was in Philly. Then the witch hunt would begin. Not that it mattered. I may have the parts for Wicked Slit, but even now I realized a stupid point I had overlooked. Like Morris, she had tricked me. The machine would count for 3 ponies. She never really intended to let me off the hook at all, given I was her 4th allotted replacement. Every pony could take advantage of me, it seemed, even when I thought I had been solving things myself. I lay down, covering my head with my hooves, as I sought to somehow make it all go away. No more merchants tricking me and withholding medicine until I worked for them. No more sickness eating at my lungs and blood. No more gangs trying to kill me. No more slavers abusing my life to suit their needs. No more everyone judging me because of some idiot centuries ago. I had perhaps bought myself a few days, but my sickness hadn't gone away, only alleviated a little from the small amounts I'd taken before leaving. Even then, The healing potions had mostly gone to use on what Noose did to me. Still didn't fix my tooth, though. I wondered what would if pony healing potions couldn't. Perhaps zebra mixes? My blood was rising, just like in the refuse pit. Scrambling my hooves over my head in frustration, I stood up, pacing back and forth as I tried to think. Come on. Think. 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 Think! I beat my hoof against my head as I stared out over the city. I could see the fun farm, its roller coaster ruins widely recognizable, as were the giant pink pony balloons above it. I could swear each one of the massive laughing faces was looking at me. Damn freaky laughing pink mare. I really hoped I could never see her again. That I'd never see anything again. Just leave and go someplace. It could just be me and my drawings, and no pony else ever again. Who needed others anyway? All they ever brought was more pain. I sighed, not even finding the energy to stay properly mad. I was exhausted. 2 days of running, being beaten, and aggravating my radiation sickness. I couldn't move properly. I couldn't even think properly to come up with a swear colorful enough to describe this life. But as I turned from the fun farm, an idea sprung to my mind. A little thought that I realized had always been in my mind. An inkling that had remained with me all throughout my life, but until today had never quite surfaced on how to protect myself from all the pain. There was a way. I trotted forward to the edge, not quite feeling my conscious thoughts in control of my body. I looked down to the ground 30 feet below. Just one way I could avoid any pony else ever hurting me again. Shaking frantically, I climbed up to the parapet. I could feel my breathing getting faster. This was the best way, right? To not give them the pleasure, right? One hoof raised, as I felt my balance waver in the wind. Was this high enough? Would it hurt? I felt my center of balance adjust, drifting out a little. The ambience went silent, as though waiting for me, other than the rush of wind by my ears. I fought down the sense of vertigo. Just one little bit of pain more, and that'd be it. The wind caught my mane and wings, as though trying to remind me of what kind of pony I was. I ignored it. The wind and the sky had no place for me. I leaned out. Beep! I stumbled, my hooves skittering about as I fell back from the ledge to land solidly on the concrete of the balcony again. Hot pain lanced through my body as I impacted on my side, before coughing twice in response. But I didn't notice that. What had beeped? Beep! My radio. The music had stopped. I scrambled over, picking it up. Wonderment at this little device was overruling my mind. I couldn't well jump without figuring this out, could I? I almost dropped it. I had been about to jump. Oh, goddesses! Shivering, I clutched the radio tightly. What in all of Equestria had I been doing? I had been about to leap from the control tower. I screwed my eyes shut, shivers turning into furious shaking, as only now the reality of how events were affecting my mind became clear. Emotional discovery could go both ways. My stomach churned at the thought of what I had almost done. In fact, it did more than churn. Dragging my belongings further from that location, gasping for breath after my stomach had been done emptying its pitiful contents, I sat down with the radio, concentrated on it. It saved you before. It'll do it again. It'll be the stable dweller or something, right? I honestly didn't care. I needed something. Anything. To stop me thinking about what I'd just come so close to doing. On cue, the speaker started up. Hello? Oh, wait, why am I saying that? This is a diary thing, isn't it?
I blinked. The voice was that of a young-sounding buck. Hell, he even sounded a little like me. Our ages were perhaps similar.
Well, what can I say for a first entry? My dad told me I should keep this up to date. For the record, he says. Well, I don't quite get what he means by that, but there's no reason I shouldn't, right? What's the harm it could do? Plus, I kinda owe him. He bought me a stable ticket after all. If things do go bad, at least I'll be safe underground, while Dad should get evacuated with the Pegasi. We'll be safe.
It was from before the war. I found myself captivated, holding the device gently between my hooves as the little speaker played out the apparently voiced diary.
So, I got sent this thing, right? Came with the ticket, they said. My pitbuck. Crazy little device, really. Pretty cool. I get my radio, audio recording, a little light to brighten up the darkness of the night, and it even interfaces with the terminal Dad bought me for my birthday. Some places don't get them early, but many of them are manufactured right here in Philadelphia, so I guess they just send them direct because there isn't any shipping. Well, I can say I'm glad for it. This thing saved my life already.
You aren't the only one.
I was coming back from picking it up, right? Well, Equestria's not how it used to be. Happiness, joy, and understanding, right? Things are just, well, different these days. Some earth ponies tried to take my ticket on my way home. Came right out of the alleyway, down Old Wood Tree Road. I mean, this thing, it saved my life. Set's saved my life tonight. I mean, oh dear, I'm all shaky again. Ponies aren't meant to fight, so why do we have to?
There was a pause, as though he was considering something. I could swear I heard a sniff.
I want this to stop. I don't want to go into a stable knowing that everything out here is going to die. But it won't happen. My dad tells me it's just all posturing, and no pony would ever be so stupid as to do something that would endanger us all. All the same, why would he spend almost his entire life savings to get me this ticket? I don't want to know what it feels like to be the last of a generation. If the worst does happen, what will we be left with? What poor ponies in the future will have to live not seeing the things I have here in this lovely city of Philly? Grass? Trees? Pure water?
I looked around at Philadelphia and saw the slave-driven hell, industry, and radioactive poison filling the air. There were no words to describe the weight of that thought.
I guess I should wrap this up. I need to go find a job since I moved here to get the ticket. Well, bye, I guess, to whoever listens to this. Probably me. I can look back and realize how silly I'm being to believe that any of this will actually happen. Well, my name is Sundial. I'm a unicorn. I guess it's worth saying. Maybe I'll tell this thing how I got my cutie mark or something next time. Till then, I guess, bye?
Bye, I muttered before wondering exactly why. I heard the speaker cut, before it switched right back to a song by Sweetie Belle. A pitbuck, then. That was the device's name. Sundial's Pitbuck. With a sudden and horrifying realization, it all slammed home. That skeleton, that had been Kkatis's. I collapsed, hugging the pitbuck and crying my little weakening heart out. My return to the fun farm was as ignominious as it was inevitable. I had returned the parts to Wicked Slit. Her reward was a week of shifts working the molten vats. My saddlebag had a couple of chems left over. That might be able to mollify the gang enough to not kill... who was I kidding?
They would kill me as soon as look at me. With a little biting, I had torn up the cloth I'd put over the pink and yellow medical saddlebag to make a rough vest for myself to hide my wings. Only the gang knew at the fun farm. Provided word didn't get out from other slaves across Philadelphia, it'd only be a matter of time till Whiplash knew. If he found out, I was screwed. Wandering past the mirror, I only merely glanced at it, seeing myself dying all over again, since the medicine had delayed things. I didn't want to look at myself. Yet my eyes were drawn to it. That big, silly image of the pink laughing pony sweeping her arm towards the mirror, as though encouraging me to look at it again. Nothing. Just a sick little Pegasus who couldn't fly, with a group of slaves moving by behind him, reflected in the mirror.
If it weren't Wicked Slit I'd sent you to, I'd probably have you up for delaying coming back. Thankfully for you, I know she's crazy.
I squeaked, jumping as I spun and fell into the cold glass of the mirror. Whiplash had moved with uncharacteristic silence up behind me, from out of the mirror's line of sight. From the grin on his face, I could imagine he had meant to scare me. Yes, master," I whispered. She kinda held me back.
Whatever. Get back in the enclosure. I have a meeting with a liaison from Protégé.
Master? I had to at least ask. Are the gang members back in? I think they want to kill me.
Murk, shift your arse.
Yes, master. Worth a try, I guess. I slumped and wandered past Whiplash as we both headed into the petting zoo to his slave groups. Waiting beside the old staff office that Whiplash used as his quarters, I saw one of Stern's griffins waiting for him. Much bigger than a pony, and bearing sharpened talons. The mercenary nodded curtly to Whiplash as he wandered over. She was clad in tough-looking body armor over her almost jet-black feathers. Even the areas most griffins had lighter colors were still only a thick gray. Across her back was slung 2 long-looking firearms, one a magical weapon, and the other looked like some sort of scoped rifle. I had no idea any of the specifics. I was no gunmaster, after all. Her eyes watched me carefully as I moved past her, trying not to let my eyes stare as I sought out the gang. I needed to avoid them and find some place safe, though every instinct told me that there were none left. Behind me, I heard Whiplash begin talking to the griffin. It quickly escalated into a near-on argument. Apparently, she was wanting slaves for this protégé from his stock. Whiplash didn't seem too happy. Neither did the gang. They stood in the middle of the enclosure, waiting for me. Noose had a look of murder. Her back showed signs of lashing from the guards. Lemon stomped impatiently. I didn't imagine a hoof to the loins was going to give him much mercy towards me. The third buck, did I ever hear his name? Simply snorted. Well, here it comes.
Stuff your wishes, Whiplash. I'm taking the ones I want, and there is no way I'm going to let your little worries stop me. Understand?
Even the gang perked up, their gaze turning to look at the situation with Whiplash and the griffin. Where they had been talking previously, now a third presence had entered. What a presence as well. Yesterday, I had been sure I had seen the biggest pony in Equestria from number 6. This earth pony stallion seemed to be even bigger, if only through girth. He had simply barged in, the griffin clearly aggravated at her own organized meeting being interrupted by this new arrival. Number 6 had been the single most terrifying pony I had ever met. This one was perhaps the more disgusting. Mangy dark brown made up his coat, while his mane and several patches of his coat had a filthy gray to them. His huge girth came atop powerful-looking legs, and while he wasn't as tall and muscular as 6 had been, He looked astonishingly strong from such a massive center of force. He was not obese, rather just largely built, with a lot of weight and power, even if a lot of it was fat. Across his hide were strapped high-quality leather barding and metal plates that hung with trinkets and small bags, whips, clubs, and what looked like a magical energy stun rod hung within mouth's reach. I tried not to look at his mouth, filled with rotting and often missing teeth. I could almost smell him from here. Even over my own drainage musk, I had to fight not to gasp as I saw his cutie mark, and almost checked my own flank to be sure. It was a single unbroken loop of chain. The pattern was almost identical to my own shackles. He dwarfed Whiplash, and even put the normally larger-than-a-pony-sized griffin to shame somewhat. By how he was standing and addressing them both, he was clearly higher in the pecking order of red-eye slavers. In fact, to my astonishment, Whiplash, the hard-faced terror of my life, looked ready to whimper before him. Who was this pony?
That little colt cuddler protege won't let me anywhere near the slaves in his stock, so I gots to come to you. Understand? Now, I asked you, which ones do you not mind missing work for a few days? I got some games I wanna play. Can't seem to keep them alive.
That rasping and filthy mouth grinned at Whiplash, before glancing at the griffin.
Unless you want to start anything, Ragini. You still loyal to the code, eh?
The griffin nodded sternly without a word. I could see her talon resting lightly on the strap of her weapon. Whiplash looked between the two with nervous eyes. This was clearly an animosity well above his level.
Look, I'll give you one slave, right? Go ask the lads at the terminal. I hear they want rid of some troublemakers after today. All right?
Oh boy, couldn't I just guess where this was going? I stood rooted to the ground, wishing I could somehow make myself invisible in plain sight.
One, eh? Who?
Murk! Get over here!
I didn't move. I didn't want to get any closer to that horrid beast of a pony.
Murk! Move yourself over here! Right now!
Whiplash's voice was a mix of anger and fear as he glanced to the intruder again. I was getting the feeling this wasn't entirely official business for Red-Eye, judging by how the griffin was lurking to the side. I still didn't move. I couldn't have. My hooves were locked firmly in the ground. With horror, I saw the new slaver instead simply follow Whiplash's glare before advancing towards me. Standing barely 2 feet in front of me, I almost retched on the stink of him alone. I trembled, clearly shivering and hyperventilating as he stared at me, looking me over.
Interesting. Not often you see a small pony like this these days. Pity I couldn't get a hold of that other one while she was here.
He seemed to lick his lips. I had to close my eyes to not dry heave on the spot. The thought of this disgusting slaver anywhere near the perfect stable dweller offended me to the core. The thought of him anywhere near me just felt like it was violating my sanity by his mere proximity. I felt his hoof reach out, lifting my chin and roughly shaking my head from side to side, examining me from angles. Bruises and sprained muscles screamed in pain, as did I. He didn't relent. Judging my size and shape, my saddlebag was pulled from my back as he reached for my makeshift vest. No! Almost on instinct, my back right hoof shot out again as he spun me around, aiming for the one spot I knew I could hurt him. He was too big, his back half too far away. I missed. No. I tried again. A bellow of rage blasted my sensitive ears as he slapped me across the side with a hoof hard enough to catapult me over into the fence. Crunching against it hard enough to set the entire fence wobbling, I fell to the ground beneath it and curled up. The slaver had murderous eyes as he shook on the spot at my impertinence to try and strike him.
You little runt.
He slowly started stomping towards me, one hoof at a time.
You think you can just try bucking me in the loins and get away with it?
I squealed in terror as I saw Whiplash not moving to interject. The griffin had disappeared.
You want to know who I am? I am going to be your new owner. How do you like that? You might have been dragged in here and given tough times, but I'll tell you now that you haven't seen the real depths of Philadelphia yet. My name is Chainlink Shackles Worm, but you will only call me by one thing. To you I am nothing but the master. Understood?
His hoof slammed to the ground, driven by his weight to leave an actual indent on the hard surface itself. Every instinct I had kicked in. This was not just any slaver. I had been born a slave, named as a slave, and gained my cutie mark as one. The master had clearly been born a slaver. He was the opposite side of the coin. Born to command me. I could not disobey. In seconds, he had asserted himself over my subconscious greater than any pony before. "Yes!" I screamed. "Yes, master!" He didn't stop advancing. Everything about him seemed designed to be the antithesis of myself. Large where I was small. Strong where I was weak. Number 6 had terrified me. The master had an effect more profound, like I knew he had been destined to be the one to own me.
Now get back over here. I want to see what I'm getting, so get that vest off.
No, I couldn't allow that. But I felt every muscle rushing to obey. DJ Pon3 had broken me free, but the everlasting chain of the master I could feel locking me back into place.
Ha! I'll tell you why he doesn't want it off.
I looked up. The third buck was running up to the master. The gang member skidded to a halt before him, pointing a back hoof at me. The master merely glared down at him with stern eyes and a scowl. I was terrified. If my place as a Pegasus was revealed here, I would be nothing but dead. Or paraded in front of Master Red-Eye by the master. And probably hung or gutted to show solidarity against Pegasi. My imagination outran my horror and revulsion, so far that I almost didn't notice for a second, as the master's hoof slammed the buck into the ground mercilessly.
I didn't.
A hoof shattered the buck's mouth.
Ask.
His mouth drew a knife so big it almost looked like a sword.
You.
The knife descended with enough force to puncture clean through the buck's neck and embed itself into the ground beneath. Twitching and gurgling, the buck died within seconds as lifeblood pumped out over the dead grass and dirt. His hooves continued to spasm for a few seconds before everything went still. The blood ran around my hooves, but I was too frozen in fear to move them, as I felt the dull warmth creeping over each hoof. Whiplash looked too terrified to react. The gang simply fled into the petting zoo.
Enough!
The griffin landed beside the master. Mouth splattered with blood, he rounded on her. The rifle was drawn, as she looked him in the eyes and stood firm, if cautiously.
Slaves aren't transferable until tomorrow night anyway, Shackles, she barked. You know that. You'll get to see him then. You'll get your prize. I'll have Protégé look elsewhere tonight for a replacement to fill the gaps. She was trying to mollify him by giving him precisely what he wanted without any more bloodshed or brutality tonight. I had seen Master Red-Eye's griffins display such behavior before. Their loyalty to him, absolute. They would often protect slaves against overly eager slavers to keep Master Red-Eye's stock intact for work shifts if they felt the production was threatened. Shackles narrowed his eyes, before bellowing in laughter and angling his head toward me.
You're just what I need, Murk,
he shouted, voice rasping on the air, just like mine.
I'll be back promptly tomorrow to take you to my, special stock. We'll have fun for sure, little Murky. Find you some real work in Philadelphia that you slaves should be doing. None of this pulling carts rubbish.
That decaying grin made me break down on the spot. I had heard the rumors. Slavers who kept special stocks of unofficial slaves for extreme work environments that they hoped would gain them more influence with Master Red-Eye. Some rumors even said they were little more than sick death games with slavers gambling on the survivors. Or the ones who didn't live through them. To go with him was a death sentence. The second one in 2 days. The Master was something bigger in Philadelphia. Part of the layers that led to such heavy cost of lives. Inwardly, I cursed my life. Everything I did just seemed to end in further slavery. Was that really all my talent was? To simply put myself in the service of others all the time? Today alone, I had run almost a half-dozen errands for various ponies, both slaver and slaves, and I had not one thing to show for my efforts, other than a couple of extra days till my sickness consumed me, or the Master throwing me into some brutal game. Even as the Master left, and Whiplash hurled me into his storage cupboard, I just felt numb. Now you're staying in here for the night. If you get brutalized in the night by them, Shackles will not be pleased. You're still working tomorrow, though, so sleep.
Of course I was. Why wouldn't a good little slave be?